Somehow, Bloober Team did it again. Look, I'm not going to bury the lead with this one. I really like Cronos: The New Dawn. I've always been lukewarm on Bloober Team games. I felt that they were much more style over substance, forgoing intentional or player-driven gameplay for beautiful but empty walking simulator spaces, relying on jump scares and artificial tension to keep you moving forward. All of that changed with the Silent Hill 2 remake, but we're not going to talk about that here. Needless to say, they've earned some optimism from that delivery, and I'm pleased to report that Cronos, under the pressure of relying on nothing but their own talent, world building, and gameplay, were able to deliver an experience that feels complete and fleshed out in a way that none of their previous game work has. Yes, Cronos emulates many titles that came before it, and I would argue that it wears those influences maybe too proudly on its sleeve, but they've also managed to emulate tight gameplay, tense resource management, and progression that feels brisk and engaging. It's harvested the weight and monsters of Dead Space, the itemization and progression of Resident Evil, and the atmosphere and suffocating tension of Silent Hill. You'll find yourself easily falling into the cadence of the game, slowly pawing through each level, counting your resources and scavenging for the spare bullet or crafting material, and immediately expending those materials as soon as you see some gangly creature that rips itself free from the gurgling flesh wall next to you. You'll find key items that agonizingly take up your extremely limited inventory space, and you'll find safe rooms where you can offload them. Look, you've seen all of this before, and there is nothing, and I really mean nothing here that feels like it distinctly its own, but it's a greatest hits collection of tropes and gimmicks, and I'm kind of here for it. If there's one thing here that feels kind of bold, it's the story and how it's told. A time-jumping post-apocalypse populated by a handful of characters on a reflective journey of fear and obligation and self-sacrifice for the greater good and identity. So while you may find yourself feeling oddly comfortable in Cronos, the tuning and skill in which all these influences were stitched together create a journey that's well worth taking. Okay, so before we start, I'll try to stay spoiler-free for most of the game. I will talk about enemies and weapons, but I'll leave the story beats for the story block, and I'll be sure to warn you before we get there. But do expect me to cover locations, puzzles, enemies, and weapons up until that point. Cool? Also, hey, if you've made it this far, please consider subscribing and maybe hitting that little thumb thing. I'm just a little guy and it helps a lot. Thank you. Okay, so just to set the scene here, you play as the Traveler, a stoic figure in what looks like a deep-sea diving suit, sent back in time to collect key figures and rip them into the future in hopes of understanding a vicious disease called the Change that's spread across Earth. It's a dangerous journey fraught with obstacles and monsters that you will have to overcome, mostly by blasting. One thing I like about Cronos is that it feels very manual. Like, this is an on-foot mission for the most part, and most of your big goals are like, get out of this ruined apartment, or get to this train, or find a way to open this door. Despite it being this time-jumping thing, the journey here feels very arduous, very worn in and simple, something even the Traveler herself comments on. So you have to trudge through rotten basements and collapsed alleys, wasteland dunes, and ancient factories. You do all of this on foot, no map, just a compass and a cardinal direction. The areas are mostly linear, but offer that standard sort of looping thing where you create cutbacks to previous areas, sometimes circling back on a locked door with a newly acquired key, or with pockets full of resources that need depositing back at one of your many little safe rooms. For the most part, you're always moving forward, but you're given just enough time to settle into an environment to learn the routes around, recalling that new shortcut that you just unlocked, or trying desperately to remember where that locked door was. Surprisingly, there are some moments where you'll do a little backtracking too, something that the genre has tried pretty hard to move on from, and I kind of love this. Full disclosure, I've always loved backtracking in horror games. There's something so dread-inducing about being forced to head back down into that horrific basement or whatever, being denied even the relief of just having left it. You remember how horrific it was, and now you have to go back, and even worse, you just know that there's some new fuckery going on down there. I don't know, it really helps build up the environment that you're in. It pulls you down, grounds you, like, no, sorry, you can't just blow through this place and move on. You're stuck here for a while. It works for me. Yeah, maybe that's a hot take, I don't really know. Let me know. It's partially because the game forces you, and partially because the areas are just big enough that you're probably not going to remember where everything is on your first run through, and partially because there's no map. Yeah, it's a bold move. They've included a compass, which I kind of wish they'd had done something different with. Everything is so stripped back here, and with a big tracking compass on top of the screen, sort of clashes for me. I'd rather have them do one of those cool 3D map things, like they lifted so much from Dead Space, you think that this would have felt at home too. You probably won't need it too much, and it's only really helpful in that it points to your main objective, but not towards any of the locked doors that you've come across or any other thing that you might want to head back to. Early on, you'll find some bolt cutters and think, okay, yeah, I need these for a puzzle, but no, you need them for the entire game. It's just about every area that you'll find an optional padlocked door or two, but these bolt cutters take up inventory space, so you'll stash them only to find a padlocked door at the very end of a long side path. So now you need to go back, weave your way to your nearest safe room, get the bolt cutters, and heading back there again. The compass won't track things like this, so pay attention or make a note. Other than navigating the areas and unlocking doors, you'll do some timey-wimey puzzling, like closing these little time rifts to rebuild pathways. Sometimes just getting to the node that you need to interact with is the puzzle in and of itself. Other times it's positioning yourself to use it in a certain location to create a lift. It's cool and tricky enough most of the time to be engaging, but without really getting tedious. They're always one and done, never overly long or complicated. Cronos wants you to keep moving in these segments, but they're cool. These are strictly puzzle moments. You never have to do these under the pressure of enemies or anything like that, which I think would have been a nice way to mix up the encounters. The game really wants you to get into puzzle mode or combat mode or exploration mode. It never really surprises you one way or the other once you settle in. You also have some traversal stuff, like with these little gravity jump things, which are neat but feel to me really dated. I remember in the classic Dead Space, not the remake, the classic, the spacewalk stuff was exactly like this, and it felt bad then and it feels bad here. Rigidly snapping around and jumping from platform to platform. Now, I obviously don't expect the free-form flying that you can do in the new Dead Space, but of everything that Cronos emulates, do they really need to emulate this? I'm not so sure. Later on, you'll encounter some puzzles where you need to connect these generators together. These are fine, and I think fall into the same issue that the other puzzles do for me, but they're all just so segmented. You're never asked to switch to any other mode when you're doing something. They're never woven into encounters in any meaningful way. You never have to rebuild a bridge to connect the power or leap from one platform to another to get an angle on one of these generators or anything like that. It's always just one thing or the other. It's not that these sections are boring, they're totally fine. They're just a little too isolated for my tastes. I'd have loved to see them build on one another in some fashion. Overall, this side of the game is good enough, mostly well-paced and bite-sized that you don't never get hung up, but toothsome enough to feel engaging in the moment. The exploration is engaging and rewards attention to detail as there's a lot of things to miss, but finding all those hidden things and resources is in and of itself kind of a burden because of the inventory management. You'd think that some time-jumping, futuristic deep-sea diver would have come equipped with more than 3 goddamn pockets. Do they not have backpacks in the future that she comes from? I don't know. You can't carry shit in this game. Each gun takes up a slot, each accompanying ammo type as well. That tiny key that you just found, inventory slot. Those bolt cutters you have to keep going back for, inventory slot. You can upgrade your capacity as you go, but of course that's at the expense of other upgrades like damage or charge time on your weapons, health, and so on. You'll never want to leave a safe room totally unprepared, but you also don't want to stock up too much as you never know if right around the corner you'll encounter some supplies or some hidden room full of goodies. And chances are you'll just find more things that want you dead, but hey, it happens. And when it does, you'll kick yourself when you can't pick any of this shit up. It's brutal because it creates these huge swings in safety and desperation. One moment after a fight, you'll be down to 2 bullets and nothing else. And then the next moment you'll restock and find a few items and you'll be thinking about what you can consume or drop to free up a slot. Or goddamn, now I've got to run all the way back to the safe room. It's this nice yo-yo effect that you're constantly running into. And it doesn't feel bad or unbalanced. It's the opposite. These swings feel intentional and always keep up a frantic, unreliable momentum in the game. Just when I'm feeling good, I get ambushed and come out limping out of that fight with my tail between my legs. And then just when I'm at my lowest, I come across a windfall of resources. It's fantastic and endlessly stressful. So you'll always be scavenging for resources, and you'll be doing that in environments that are oftentimes claustrophobic and intimate, and always haunting and otherworldly. You'll spend much of your time weaving through ruined buildings lost to time or once populated neighborhoods consumed by the change. You're in tight hallways or cramped rooms, service tunnels, or apartments. It's one of the few games where I just walked through the whole thing. The Traveler has such a physical presence in the space, her heavy footfalls as she plods through dark hallways, her soft grunts and breathing as she squeezes through broken down walls, the leathery friction of her suit as she raises her arms to ready her weapon. All of this, coupled with her deep-sea diver aesthetic, makes you feel like such an alien, so out of place in time. It's incredibly immersive. The use of lighting is incredible as well, with some striking and eerie vistas around every corner. Areas as mundane as an apartment or strip malls are foreign and foreboding. There is fantastic atmosphere to be found here, relentlessly dread-inducing intense. If it's not a vacant and destroyed building that you're pawing through, it's a disgusting, plague-ridden infestation site. Yeah, this is where it feels like Dead Space, alright. Organic growth crawls up walls and chokes out whatever remnant of man-made structure there once was. It spreads like cancer across every surface, turning into a gurgling biomass formed by what used to be people. Everything is weeping flesh, groping hands, and screaming faces of those consumed by this thing. It's crazy how quickly you can go from a section of quiet but tense exploration to walking into a nightmare flesh tunnel, which is not something I ever wanted to say. But really, the tone can shift very quickly here, surprisingly so, as you turn a corner or nudge through a hole in the wall and find yourself consumed by this stuff. These areas are dark and difficult to navigate, with tight corners and easy ambush spots. I hate these areas in the best way. I'm stressed because I want to get out so badly, but I know the only way out is forward. And before I can get out, I have to get through whatever else inhabits these spaces, which is a good time to talk about the enemies. So there's really only one kind of enemy in the game called orphans. These are melted cheese monsters that claw themselves out of the flesh walls and lumber towards you, elastic arms ready to grab you and gnashing teeth ready to break through that big fishbowl helmet you wear. They're cool, if a little mundane. They're not human enough to be uncanny and creepy, and they're not monstrous enough to be truly horrifying for the most part. They don't really employ any surprising tactics and telegraph their moves. They match the Traveler's very limited mobility, which is good, but they don't generally put up any compelling fights. The tension in the fights primarily stem from resource management, but we'll get there. The one big thing these guys do is merge with other corpses. So when you're in the middle of a fight and see one of them start slinking away, you better stop what you're doing and get after them. You want to stop these merges at all costs because it enhances their strength and defense, growing plated sections over their bodies that bounce bullets, demanding more intentional aim and putting further strain on your ammo. You can knock them out of this mode or set them on fire to put a hard stop to it, so watch out. There are some clear audio cues when this is happening, which is really nice. You straight up do not possess the resources to sink to these beefed up enemies, so tight control over the battlefield is demanded if you want to survive. Aside from the standard orphans and the mandatory green poison spitting ones, there are these big hulking guys, which I like a little bit more. They seem more intentional, using a big squiggly arm to block your bullets while marching toward you with a little more brutality. I like these guys, and they really shake up a room. While, yeah, the function of them is nothing too surprising, they put pressure on you in a way that the others don't, and they have a little more personality all around. There are some bosses here, and like the other enemies, they're fine. They don't move the needle too much. They never really escalate the framework of combat that was established from like the very first encounter in the game. Strafe around the room and burn bodies, that's kind of it. In the larger arenas, you'll find some environmental explosives that are paramount to you surviving the fight, but that's it in terms of flavor to be found here. By the last arena fight in the game, you're employing the same tactics that you were in the first one, lining up enemies and detonating explosives, kiting them around as you go. Your arsenal absolutely continues to expand as the game goes on, but what the game asks of you during combat never really does. I was almost never put in a surprising situation or a combat puzzle to solve, or facing a new and mechanically complex enemy that tested my skills. The best here is when they throw in a spinning enemy that effectively blocks off pathways with their acid, or when they toss in a big guy that takes priority while also requiring you to keep an eye on the battlefield to ensure that none of these gummy worm dudes are merging with a body laying around. And that's not to say that this is bad, because that's absolutely not the case. What's here is razor sharp, with combat encounters that are tuned to near perfection. Every bullet given, every enemy placed is meticulously balanced. It's the resource management that elevates these fights to something spectacular. While the structure here is simple, the execution is immaculate, requiring intentional use and careful planning at every level. You cannot fuck around here. You do not have the ammo or the health for it. The game doles out resources at the level of something like grounded difficulty from The Last of Us. It wants you to hoard every bullet, and you're punished if you miss a shot, and the teaching mechanic here is just killing you. The game expects you to die, often repeatedly, to understand the fights that it puts you in. It does not like sloppy, Pyrrhic victories, it likes precision and intentionality. You really can't just slug your way through these things, improvising as you go or wasting ammo, or hell, even just suboptimally using that ammo. Most of the guns have a charge mechanic, spooling up to a supercharged shot that does massive damage compared to the standard round. These are not optional, they're mandatory, because even with the charged shot, these monsters take several to go down. Only use an uncharged shot in an absolute emergency, and honestly, if you found yourself in that position, you might as well just die and retry. You need to be precise. The combat is fantastic because the Traveler is rather clunky to control, slow to turn around and aim, so you might as well be locked in place when you're aiming your weapon like an old school Resident Evil game. How slow she shuffles around. Coupled with the grueling charge time of these weapons, it forces you to move thoughtfully around while the enemies close in and the environments crowd around your shoulders. It's pressure, constant pressure, and you must remain composed. Under that pressure is a demand for precision and calm, because the consequence of missing that shot or taking that hit is severe. It's really good stuff. So good that it can carry you through the whole game. It's buoyed still by the weapons themselves, which continue to expand at a pretty steady clip. You start with the standard pistol, and this thing will be a mainstay for the entire game. Slow charge time and small ammo capacity. Initially, I thought this thing felt really bad, because even when you used that charged shot, it felt like a squirt gun against these dudes. But after investing in it through the course of the game, it began to feel like the hand cannon it looks like. You can't really get away from using this thing, and it's enough to deal with most enemies in small groups, though it lacks crowd control in larger fights and suffers from a slow reload and low ammo capacity, both of which can be upgraded if you so choose. Ammo for this thing is plentiful enough, but that's not to say reliable. You'll constantly be switching up your arsenal solely based on what bullets you have available. I regularly found myself forced to spend high-value ammo for guns like the shotgun or rifle, simply because I had to survive the fight. It's a painful ask, but the resource economy being tuned the way it is, sometimes you just got it, man. Next up is the shotgun, and this thing kicks ass. Pulling the trigger on this thing is the first time you feel remotely powerful in the game. It comes packed with a brutal charge time and massive recoil, really making only squeezing off one shot viable before needing to relocate. That is if there's anything left standing when the smoke clears. This thing is a powerhouse. Relish the ammo for it and pull it out for emergencies only. Later on, you can get an upgrade that increases the damage of the blast when it hits more enemies, and that is indispensable. You spend so much of your time in combat pacing around the arena, so line up a trail of enemies and blow them away like feathers. But even this thing has applicable uses. You won't want to spend this ammo on the gray, meandering enemies because they go down quick, and you don't necessarily want to spend it on one of the tougher, upgraded orphans because their bodies are patchwork with damage-resistant plates. You want precision to take them down. You'll want to keep an eye on what types of enemies make up the crowd that's chasing you, and you'll have to make a call if a spread of buckshot is the right choice to take out that group. You'll also find a rifle, and I actually really like this one. It's a tight 3-round burst, quick charge time, high stability, and low recoil. It might do less damage than the pistol or the shotgun, but it's great for popping off shots at medium range, and interestingly, the further I progressed in the game, the more comfortable I felt with it. It feels like a higher skill weapon, rewarding if you land all the shots, but at a high cost if you miss them. The charge mode of this one sends a volley of homing shots that I kind of like. Sometimes with the larger enemies or the crawling ones, you can quickly lock on and fire off a few rounds while on the move. It's not too useful too often, but it's nice in a pinch. Kind of weirdly, you get some iterations of weapons that don't provide that much value. Like the handgun gets a 3-round burst variant, sort of a halfway version of the rifle, but it does less damage than the pistol and the rifle. I don't know, I would have preferred if this entire weapon be an unlockable alternative firing mode for the pistol rather than its own gun. And of course it takes up its own inventory slot, so I never saw a reason to lug it around. Similarly with the rifle, you unlock another version of it that's just kind of better. It hits harder but lacks the homing function, which, yeah, that's fine. This game is all about damage, not really utility. You need to squeeze every ounce of juice out of your ammo, so doing anything other than the highest potential damage feels like a waste. Lastly, you get this sick ass railgun that I love, but found very little use for. You get it really late in the game and come across a total of like 5 rounds for it, but it fires with a wicked explosive that deletes everything in sight. Save this thing to make short work of any boss or horde of enemies you come across. You'll find that it pays for itself in your New Game Plus run. So I'm going to try to blur out as much of this next part because there's some story spoilers here. But yeah, there's one additional layer to character progression here in the form of these slottable passive upgrades that are strictly tied to story beats. These things provide pretty massive benefits but are overwritten permanently if you choose to accept another one. It's kind of comically sinister because many of these things are so good, only to come across an equally exciting one, but damn, you have to delete one in order to take it. You can't have anything free in this game. Like I mentioned earlier, there's one that improves the shotgun spread, which I found invaluable, but you can't go wrong with massively increased melee damage or increased damage to burning enemies. Feel it out as you're playing, but be ready to commit. I found immense use out of the burning enemies one, again trying to wring dry the value in each and every shot. If I have to spend one of my flamethrower charges, I also wanted to increase the damage of my other weapons while it's burning shit down. Through all of this, there's enough here that combat never gets stale, but it also never ends up elevating to be more than the sum of its parts. It's really good, but I still can't help but feel like there's a missing ingredient here. Maybe it's the encounter design or the lack of any real surprises once the game gets going, or maybe it's the weapons. End of the day, it's a very capable package that will serve you well enough to get through its 15-ish hour story. Okay, last up, the thing that ties this whole game together, the linchpin of this weird, otherworldly, nightmarish experience, the story. Okay, so you know the drill, spoilers from this point on, nothing is safe, so if you want to experience things for yourself, go to here. So to open this block, I'd like to say that if you're looking for an exhaustive analysis of every facet of the story, this video is not it. What we have here is a complicated journey through time and looping timelines in an intentionally vague and mysterious world. While no doubt I believe that the truth is out there, I think with a story like this, the gaps, the inconsistencies, and the lingering mysteries is what makes it special, what makes it memorable. I like to remain in the dark a little in fiction like this, so please enjoy my ramblings for the next few minutes. So I think it's safe to say that the thing that feels most unique in this game is the story, a sci-fi post-apocalypse adventure through time and space to find a cure or understand a mysterious disease that's wiped out humanity. You play the Traveler, an agent sent down by the Collective to fulfill the vocation and continue the work by extracting essences. And yeah, this game plays the proper noun game in a big way. It's immediately indicative of a story that's going to be confusing and twisty, reserved in its exposition, and I think that's a very good thing. The world has ended, and you're trying to either bring it back to life, or undo it, or understand it, or something. Look, I'll be totally honest, I played through this game a few times, and I'm still piecing this thing together. Let's start from the broad strokes and work down. A disease called the Change has taken over everything. It's a vicious thing that literally melts down bodies into giant swaths of moaning biomass. People's bodies begin to break down and fuse together, beginning with blindness and hysteria and ending in total mutation. You spend much of the game exploring the collapse in a few key locations, reading up on futile attempts to stop the disease, the response that locals and officials had to its rampant progress, painting often uncomfortable parallels to recent world lockdowns. Everything is gone, save for those unlucky souls that were not able to merge together with the greater fleshy structures, the orphans. There is an odd parallel here with the disease and to what the traveler is sent down to do, collect people's essences, their souls, to join the collective. It's sort of the same thing. In the past, people's bodies melted down to join one hive mind organic entity thing, and the collective in the future wants to do the same thing, but by targeting the human soul as opposed to the human body. You collect key people, those who have some pertinent information as to how the disease began or maybe how to cure it, in an attempt to bolster the collective hive mind in the future to save or evolve humanity. It's creepy, like you're digitizing their consciousness, because it sounds incredibly painful when you finally do one. Not much is known about the collective or the vocation or any of the other high concept sci-fi stuff that operates in the background. The game uses that as a launching pad for the story, and then things get mired in a series of personal stories of the people that you're sent down to get. And I love this. An unsolved mystery is always more exciting than one that's neatly buttoned up, and there is much, much left up to the imagination here. I applaud Bloober Team's restraint in this way. It feels like there is so much that we're left in the dark about, and I adore that. Now, your mileage may vary, and I admit, while I love their decision to leave the world-saving sci-fi stuff kind of in the background, I don't exactly love what they chose to focus the story on. Yeah, the collective's some kind of elevated hive mind that operates on some kind of system that sends down individual travelers in order to search for their targets. They only send down one at a time, only activating another when their predecessor goes offline. They pick up their gear and assume their targets and get going. So these travelers, what are they? Are they human? I don't think so. Your traveler speaks in a stilted, strained way, and I spent my entire playthrough trying to figure out exactly what she sounds like. To my ears, it's definitely not robotic, but there's something there.
Where did the cats come from? I noticed that the space around the terminal is inhabited.
It's eerie and evocative and a fantastic directional choice. Each time she spoke, I found myself analyzing it, listening for any tell that might clue me into what the hell she is. When you're talking to another traveler that you meet, the warden, they refer to themselves as units, not people, and dying as terminating function. But also with the warden, when you see his suit is all damaged, missing the sheathing on his arms and leg, right? Well, that's what's under the suit. They're all robots, but they react like humans physically to their environment, grunting and screaming when hurt, breathing and sighing when frustrated. Simultaneously, at least our traveler doesn't seem to experience fear, stoically clearing a room of monsters before calmly reiterating her mission statement, which, holy shit, is just so badass. Later on, you'll find corpses of fallen travelers covered in blood, but what's under the suit is never really shown. Also, when you do come across a traveler that's being consumed by the biomass, to my eyes, it doesn't look like they're being integrated into it like a person, just sort of grown around it like they're part of the environment. I think the biggest indication of their nature is an audio log from the warden where he kind of pontificates about death. How human beings begin degrading from the day that they're born and are earned this sort of blissful conclusion of drifting away, where all he has to face is the crushing restraint of being trapped in this metal shell as his mental processing declines. Whatever the case, well done to Bloober Team. You managed to create a main character that is enigmatic and interesting despite being faceless and nearly expressionless. Yeah, so we've got the collective and the change, the traveler and her targets. How does all of that galvanize the story? Well, it kind of doesn't. If the game loses the plot in a way that I absolutely respect, even if I don't love the direction they took, this is ultimately a story about two characters, the Pathfinder and Veronica. The Pathfinder you meet as the Warden, a surprisingly still active traveler unit maintaining some collective equipment. He helps you on your journey and begins to feed into your traveler's dissolution with the vocation. So when you captured your first essence in the game, you sort of slot that fucker into this giant terminal like a SNES cartridge and upload him to the collective. Your traveler calls it soulless. She seems to be at peace here and seems to think that this should comfort her target as well. Through her sparse dialogue, it's implied that she really thinks that this is the answer for humanity. But something goes wrong here with the upload. He says this. And then the traveler is ripped out of the system and she says this. This is the beginning of her journey questioning the collective. What is her purpose here, and what is the true purpose of the vocation? What is the consequence of capturing these people? I fucking love this. It's explored subtly for the rest of the game. You notice that she stops reiterating her purpose to herself after a tough fight or in response to who she speaks with. She begins asking more questions and pausing in a way that she didn't before. The Warden is well on this path. He sort of fluctuates between hopeless nihilism and flickering hope as he explores what humankind was, how human they were. He helps our traveler along this path, almost manipulatively so, nudging her along and encouraging her doubt. So I said this was a story about the Pathfinder and Veronica. So the Warden is the Pathfinder, a traveler like ours who felt disillusioned with the collective and who failed to extract his target, Veronica. He became obsessed with her, refusing to extract her as intended. A big point of distinction here, as intended, but also refusing to let her go. Veronica would meet the Pathfinder when he was captured by local government, and they develop a sort of bond as she saw the humanity in him and he saw the humanity in her. She would inevitably end up getting infected by the change. It got everybody. And the Pathfinder would refuse to let her go, extracting her essence and somehow, not totally clear on this part, slotting her essence into a new traveler sent down by the collective. That's you, baby. You're Veronica, or some uploaded memory-wiped version of her. You see flashes of what look like memories or representations of memories of everyone you extract. And when you begin the game, you get those same flashes. Why would we be seeing those if we're just a robot sent down or whatever? We've been rebooted as Veronica. Another big thread on the game here is that these extracted essences can't live with the traveler forever. If they remain with them too long before being uploaded to the collective, they begin to irreversibly merge. The traveler's being and those that they're carrying become tied together, or overwritten almost. We see that happen in the game, both in the form of a young boy that was extracted but never ascended, eventually taking over the corpse of a traveler who snatched him, and with our traveler herself. As the game goes on, she's increasingly haunted by the voices of those she's captured. And there's something so horrific about this. They're scared, they're angry, disembodied spirits bouncing around the giant fishbowl of a helmet you're wearing. Everything here is just a shade of the change itself. You can see where this is going. The Pathfinder slots Veronica into one of these fresh out of the oven travelers, hoping that she will overtake that body and become an undying version of herself, that she can truly escape the change. But it keeps failing for some reason. He's been trying this for a while, which explains many of the slaughtered travelers that you come across. So this is what I'm talking about when I say that your mileage may vary with the story. Like, at its core, I love that there's this big, high concept sci-fi thing looming over the story that's paramount to the mechanical workings of the story, but never really comes into focus. I think that's really neat. I like it because this is a story about humanity and refusing to accept fate. And what's more human than to ignore the giant existential threat to focus on your loved ones, your fear of death, your regrets? All of that is great. But simultaneously, even through a couple playthroughs, I'm still not sold on the Veronica Pathfinder story. It's fine, there's nothing wrong with it, and I think that the issue comes from how it's parsed out in the game rather than the story itself. You don't see a whole lot. Most of this is conveyed through audio logs and written notes, and then bam, a couple large exposition scenes towards the end. You retrace the steps of both characters, sort of accompanying their past selves to where they end up landing. But I don't know, it felt hard to sympathize with their journey when you don't get to spend too much time with them. Their story, while super important, is kind of secondary to what you spend most of the game doing and where your objectives lie for most of that time. Again, nothing bad about it, and when I scripted this thing out, I find myself reflecting positively on the story, but in the moment, in the playing, I didn't find this aspect too compelling. There are a couple of endings here, and this is where it gets a little timey-wimey. The entire nature of the story is a time paradox, right? Like if the collective exists in the future in response to the change, and keeps fucking with people in the past, the instant they do something wrong or make some meaningful change to the change, the collective ceases to exist, right? When they finally yank out the correct person, it's all over. The Pathfinder keeps going back in time in an attempt to save Veronica, failing endlessly. You can shoot the Pathfinder at the end, sending Veronica back through the portal to finally close the loop in a horribly bleak ending where she succumbs to the change like everyone else. You can spare the Pathfinder, which as far as I understand it, makes it as if nothing happened at all. The Pathfinder and Veronica go back in time again, but to the point where Veronica is already in the advanced stages of the change. Perhaps this is the first instance of him extracting her and slotting her into the Traveler. It's just another loop. Then the final ending, and perhaps the most hopeful one, shows a change in the paradigm that our guys have been stuck in. This one sees the Traveler take the place of the Pathfinder, waking another Traveler, this time seemingly a fully realized Veronica, emerging from her pod as you did in the beginning of the game. This implies a kind of optimism that the other endings lacked. Now, without the Pathfinder fucking around with everything in an infinite time loop, the Traveler and Veronica can begin the real work, assumingly abandoning the vocation and working to restore humanity. Seeing as they're now both immune to the change, they can freely hop through time to work on solutions. I like this one, and it's only available after beating the game in New Game Plus, so it's thematically fitting to break that loop because you have to go through that loop again to finally be free of it. There's still the lingering question of the change itself. Can it be stopped at all? But for the first time in the game, we see characters in a place where they're equipped to tackle that question, and they're off to do it. Yeah, man, so I like Cronos. I really dug this game. In some ways, the game is like the change itself, wrapped up, melded together amalgamation of many things, come together to create something new but familiar, if not totally able to break free of its original shape and become something entirely different. But what's here is deftly made and elevated by Bloober Team's restraint in their story and gameplay. They committed to a razor-thin resource economy that will assuredly push some people out without even the ability to tune it or switch to an easy mode or something. But to me, that speaks to a confidence here, and I think the game is much better for it. I'd have loved to see some more ingenuity in the puzzles and combat, would have loved to see those zones evolve as the game goes on, but the highs of the gameplay and the obtuse, vague story and characterization elevate the lows in a big way. There's a lot they could do with this universe. Walking away, you may feel a little confused with some of the greater world building here. Who exactly are the collective? How did they come to be? We know that the change originated under the Steelworks, but what is it? Why are all the buildings chipping away and floating into space? Who knows? But honestly, I don't particularly care. The mystery is what makes it so compelling. The joy of spending time in a world like this is the not knowing. Those lingering questions clawing at the back of your brain, the urge to replay the game over and over again because, damn it, the truth must be out there. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. Damn, the journey to get to this place of not knowing is so worth it. Thanks for watching.